My mom kicked me out at 18, saying, "Time to start your own life." She spent 12 years telling me my father was lost overseas. Then I learned the truth, and once we finally walked into court together, every lie she'd built collapsed right in front of her. Hey, Reddit! My family always treated me like I was the spare tire they never wanted, while my little stepsister got the throne. I figured I'd just keep my head down until I turned 18 and could leave on my own terms. Before I get into the insanity that followed, let me take you back to where it all actually started. My name's Kai Rollins, I'm 18, and I grew up in a house where I was basically the extra piece nobody ordered. My mom Rhea remarried when I was 6, had my stepsister Lila a year later, and from then on, everything revolved around her. My stepdad Trent acted like I was some temporary house guest he couldn't wait to get rid of. It wasn't violent or dramatic. Just years of being ignored, blamed, or treated like I was messing up their perfect little family. I learned early to just stay out of the way and handle my own stuff. Anyway, the morning this whole story starts was my 18th birthday, which I figured would at least be neutral. I wasn't expecting balloons or cake, just maybe a normal day. Instead, I woke up freezing. Not regular cold, but the type where you can see your own breath. My room always had the weakest heat, but this was different. I checked the vent. Shut completely. Again, I heard noise downstairs, laughing, plates clinking, something sizzling. For a second, I thought maybe, just maybe, they remembered my birthday. Then I smelled pancakes, and whipped cream, and chocolate chips. Yeah, that wasn't for me. I opened my door, and warm air hit my face immediately. Like the rest of the house was running tropical temperatures just fine. My room was the only one left out in the tundra. When I walked into the kitchen, the first thing I saw was balloons. Pink and purple. A glitter sign on the table that said, "Happy half-birthday, Lila." Her actual half-birthday had been a week earlier, but Mom decided it was more fun to celebrate it on my birthday. My stepsister was sitting there with a stack of pancakes taller than my self-esteem, ripping open presents like it was Christmas morning. She looked up at me and waved, all innocent. Mom turned, saw me, and immediately got that annoyed tight smile she saves just for me. "Kai, really? You're stomping around on Lila's special morning?" I hadn't even opened my mouth yet. I just pulled out a chair and sat down quietly. I wasn't jealous, just observing, the same way I always did. This wasn't new. Lila could sneeze and they'd call it a milestone. Trent stood near the stove flipping another pancake. He saw me and sighed loud enough to count as an insult. "Dude, can you not? Lila needs a positive environment today." I looked at Lila, who was humming to herself with zero awareness of any negative energy. But whatever, I wasn't there to ruin anything. I just wanted to grab some toast and plan my day in peace. Before I could even stand back up, Rhea said, "Actually, Kai, we need to talk. Living room. Now." They use the tone parents use when they're pretending to be serious and mature, but you can feel the fake all over it. Trent followed behind her, wiping pancake batter off his hands like he was about to fire an employee. I walked into the living room and saw 2 trash bags by the front door. Great. Rhea crossed her arms. "Since you're 18 now, it's time for you to grow up and start your own life." Trent nodded like he was the CEO of my future. "Yeah, man. You've been draining us for long enough. Lila needs stability, and honestly, we can't keep supporting you." I looked at the trash bags. "So you packed for me. Efficient." Trent scowled. "This attitude is exactly why this is happening." Rhea added, "We have to prioritize Lila's future. She deserves a peaceful home." I raised an eyebrow. "Because I woke up this morning?" Her jaw tightened. "You know what I mean. Anyway, you'll leave today." I wasn't surprised. They'd been hinting at this for months. Every time I asked for something basic, like money for school supplies or permission to stay after class for a club, it became a fight about how grown I needed to be. The only shocking part was how absolutely not shocking it was. I leaned back on the couch and said, "All right, but you could have at least waited until after pancakes." Trent's eyes narrowed. "Don't get smart." I pointed at the bags. Already done that too, apparently. That made Rhea mad. But I didn't care. I wasn't pleading, crying, or doing whatever dramatic scene they probably expected. I grabbed the trash bags, opened the door myself, and stepped outside. Lila was standing on the staircase watching me with a confused little frown, wanted to say something but didn't. The door slammed and clicked behind me. Just like that. I spent the next few hours walking around, carrying those trash bags like a cliché movie character. But I wasn't spiraling or anything. I just needed a plan. Food, a place to sleep. Get through the next 24 hours. Pretty simple list. The shelter downtown seemed like the most logical option, so I walked there. The woman behind the desk, Maribel, handed me some paperwork. I filled it out fast. Name, age, medical stuff, emergency contacts. The weird part was the line for father's status. I wrote what I'd always been told. Deceased. KIA in Afghanistan. Maribel glanced at it, paused, then looked at me differently. Kai, your father died in service? Yeah. When I was 6, that's what my mom said. She didn't respond right away. She frowned, then said, we partner with the VA a lot. Mind if I check something? Sometimes records get weird. I nodded. She stood up and walked to the back desk with her phone, spelling Damien's name and service number out loud like she'd done it 100 times. She kept stepping away, lowering her voice, calling different extensions. After maybe 10 minutes, she came back with her face pale, like she'd seen something impossible. Kai, your father isn't dead. I stared at her. Not shocked, just confused at the logistics. She continued. He's alive. He's at Palmer VA Hospital. He's been there for 12 years. I processed the information quietly, like solving a simple equation. All right, I finally said. So we're going. Maribel nodded. Yes, right now. And just like that, my entire life shifted directions. But I didn't freak out. I just grabbed my bags and followed her out the door. Maribel's car smelled like old coffee and those little air freshener trees, but it was warm and quiet, which was all I needed. I sat in the passenger seat, holding the 2 trash bags that apparently counted as my whole life, and went through things in my head, lining everything up. What I knew, what had just changed, and what needed answers. If my dad was alive, that meant my mom lied about something huge. Not a small lie. This was a 12-year commitment to a full story. Funeral, therapy, documents, the works. And for what? What did she gain from pretending he was dead? I kept replaying the difference between how she treated me and how she treated Lila. Lila got new clothes whenever she grew bored of her old ones. She got special meals because she was picky, while I got told to eat whatever was there. She had piano, gymnastics, and tutoring. Even though she quit half the things Mom signed her up for, I couldn't even stay after school for a club because Trent said, we don't have time to be driving you around. Meanwhile, Lila got dropped off and picked up 4 times a day sometimes. It wasn't jealousy. It was math. My mom and Trent built their lives around Lila. I'd never fit into that picture. Maribel glanced over at me once like she wanted to ask if I was okay, but I guess she saw I wasn't falling apart and kept her focus on the road. She pulled into the VA parking lot a few minutes later. The building was big, white, and clean. One of those places that looked more like an office park than a hospital inside. Everything smelled like sanitizer and floor wax. A nurse at the reception desk recognized Maribel and waved her through. They led us down a hallway with fluorescent lights humming above us. Then Maribel stopped at a door and said quietly, he's inside. I nodded and pushed it open. Damien Rollins was standing near the window wearing hospital-issue clothes, but he didn't look weak or confused. He looked alert, solid. His posture was straight, and his eyes snapped toward me the second I walked in. Dark hair, a bit messy, light stubble. Older than I remembered from pictures, obviously, but still him. He stared hard for a second like he was checking every detail. Kai? He said, like he already knew the answer and just needed to hear it. Yeah, I said. That's me. And he stepped closer in 3 long strides and stopped just close enough that I could smell the generic hospital soap on his skin. His hand came up, landed on my shoulder, firm. No shaking. You're taller, he said quietly. Last time I saw you, you were 6 and you tried to dunk a chicken nugget in your milk. I snorted. That sounds like me. I asked about you, he said, eyes locking onto mine again. Every month, every visit, every form. They told me you wanted nothing to do with me, that you were better off not seeing me. I shook my head. Mom told me you died in Afghanistan when I was 6. He blinked once, very slow, like he was processing rage but keeping it controlled. She told you I died? Yeah. There was a whole memorial. Flowers. People talking about you being a hero. Damien's jaw tightened. There was no funeral. I was here. They had full access to me. The funeral I remembered suddenly made more sense. No flag over a casket, no honor guard, just a rented room and a slideshow on a cheap projector. While Rhea told everyone he were gone, I shrugged. Guess they didn't want me visiting. He stepped back and ran a hand down his face. Not frustrated at me, but at the situation. 12 years. They built an entire lie between us. Looks like it, I said. Maribel cleared her throat gently, letting him know she was still in the room. Damien nodded at her like he appreciated that she brought me. He turned back to me. Are you living with them? No, they kicked me out today. On my birthday. I said it flat. Just fact. That was the moment I saw something flash in his expression. Sharp, protective anger. They did what? They packed 2 bags and told me I was draining them. Lila needs all the attention, apparently. Damien's eyes narrowed. They favored her over you? Always. And my benefits? He asked quietly. Did you ever see any of the money the VA sent? I shook my head. Mom said we were broke all the time. Damien closed his eyes for half a second, then stood straighter. His voice had an edge now. They stole from you. They stole from me. We're dealing with this. A doctor stepped into the room then, flipping through a chart. Mr. Rollins, since your son is here, we can discuss discharge options. He'll need to provide stable housing and be listed as your primary support. I didn't hesitate. He's coming with me. Maribel stepped in then, like she'd been waiting for the opening. He can stay at the transitional motel we partner with, she said. I can put both of you down for an emergency placement. It won't cost anything for now. The doctor looked surprised for a second, but nodded. All right, we'll begin the paperwork. He didn't smile exactly, but something in his expression settled. Like he was ready, finally, to walk out of here and deal with everything head on. And just like that, we started the next step. Damien's discharge paperwork had officially started, but he wasn't the type to sit around letting things settle on their own. The moment Maribel confirmed the transitional motel room was approved, he said, "Before we go there, we're stopping at the house." He didn't ask if I was okay with it. He just looked at me, waiting for a yes or no. I gave a simple, "Yeah, let's get it over with." We went by bus. Damien refused a wheelchair or any help, even though the nurse suggested it. He walked slow but steady, hands in his pockets, eyes focused straight ahead. Even after 12 years in a hospital, he still carried himself like someone who expected to be listened to. When we reached the street, the house looked exactly the same as it had that morning. Trimmed bushes, Lila's pastel bike leaning against the garage, a cartoon sun decoration taped to the front door. You'd never guess the people inside were capable of the kind of lies they'd kept up for over a decade. Damien didn't hesitate. He walked right up the driveway, up the porch steps, and knocked once, hard. The door cracked open, and Lila peeked out first. She blinked a few times when she saw me, then looked at Damien with this weird mix of curiosity and recognition. "You look like the man in Mommy's pictures," she said. Before Damien could answer, a hand shot out and yanked her backwards. Rhea appeared, wide-eyed, gripping Lila by the shoulder like she was protecting her from a wolf. "Oh my God," she breathed. "Damien, you shouldn't be here. You need to be resting." Damien raised an eyebrow. "Resting? You told my son I was dead." Rhea's face twitched. "Sweetheart, you must be confused. You weren't well. The doctor said you were unstable and—" "Stop," Damien cut in, voice flat. "I'm not confused and I'm not unstable. You lied. For 12 years. Trent suddenly appeared behind her, stepping forward with the kind of posture men use when they think it makes them look tougher. "Hey!" he barked. "You can't just show up here. This is our home." Damien stepped forward too, just a single step, but enough to make Trent instinctively lean back. Damien wasn't big, but he had presence. Trent's whole alpha man of the house routine crumbled instantly. "This was my home," Damien said, eyes on him. "You moved into it and built a fantasy on top of my grave." Rhea pressed a hand to her chest, like she was the injured one. "We didn't have a choice. You were gone. The doctors said you were too far." "The doctors told me you refused visits," Damien snapped. "They told me you said Kai didn't want to see me. They told me you didn't want my name on paperwork, and I believed them because I thought you were grieving. But you weren't grieving. You were cashing checks." I pulled out my phone and let it hang low at my side, camera pointed toward them. No shaking, no panic, just documentation. Rhea noticed and snapped, "Kai, what are you doing? Turn that off." I ignored her. Damien continued, eyes fixed on her. "You took the money meant for us. You staged a memorial to make the lie stick. You cut my son out of his own father's life, and you did all of it while spending thousands on your little princess's lessons and toys." Rhea gasped in offense, like the Lila part was what truly upset her. "Don't drag Lila into this. I was protecting her from chaos," Damien scoffed. "Chaos? The only chaos here is the mess you created." Trent tried again, puffing up. "Look, man, you need to leave before I call the cops." "You call them," Damien said calmly. "I'd love to explain how you stole 12 years of VA benefits. They'll be very interested." Trent's mouth opened, closed, then tightened. His eyes flicked to the phone in my hand. Rhea switched tactics instantly. Classic move. Her voice went soft, trembling, fake. "Damien, please. You have to understand. I was alone. I had a baby. You were gone. I didn't know what else to do." "You didn't know what to do?" Damien repeated. "You could have told the truth." She shook her head fast. "You don't know what it was like raising 2 kids on my own." I cut in, voice even. You didn't raise two. You raised one. I was just in the background. Rhea glared at me like I'd stabbed her. How dare you talk to me like that after everything I did for you? Damien turned slightly toward me. Don't bother, Kai. She only hears what suits her. He looked back at them. This conversation is over. We have what we came for. I stopped recording and slid my phone into my pocket. Damien didn't need to say anything else. He just stepped off the porch and I followed. No yelling, no dramatic exit, just leaving them standing there with their fake shocked expressions. We walked down the street in silence until we were out of view of the house. Then Damien finally spoke. You handled that well. I shrugged. I'm used to them. Not anymore, he said. We reached the bus stop and sat down. The day was cold but not unbearable. After a few minutes, he asked, You record all that? Yeah. Got everything. Good. We're going to need it. We got to the motel a half hour later. The room was small. 2 beds, a tiny table, and a bathroom that probably hadn't been updated since the early 2000s, but it was private and quiet. He pulled out his own hospital file. Together, we started laying everything out. Timelines, receipts, bank screenshots, discharge papers, emails I'd saved, even the audio from the confrontation. The morning after the confrontation, I borrowed the motel lobby's computer to look up extended family. I didn't expect much, but it made sense to tighten the timeline. Damien sat beside me, flipping through his discharge papers like he was reviewing intel. I started calling relatives one by one. Most of the numbers were old or disconnected. The few who answered reacted the same way, defensive, annoyed, or overly sympathetic toward Rhea. One aunt immediately said, Rhea told us you were acting out again. I don't want to be in the middle of your drama. Drama. That word again. Another uncle said, Your mom went through a lot. Maybe you should cut her some slack. Cut her slack for lying about a funeral? Damien, listening in, muttered, She groomed them well. The only relative who sounded remotely neutral was a cousin who said, I thought it was weird she moved states right after the memorial, but she said it was for Lila's schooling. Of course she did. I didn't argue with anyone. I didn't correct them, yell, or explain. I just said, all right, thanks, and hung up each time. Every reaction told me exactly how deep Rhea's manipulation had gone. She'd spent years building her story. Later that day, Damien checked his email account. Then he saw it. A long message from Rhea. Practically an essay she tried to rewrite the past line by line. She said she'd carried the weight of a broken family, that I'd been difficult since childhood, and she lied so much she accidentally contradicted herself 3 times. She ended the message with, You forced me into impossible decisions. I saved the email as a PDF and added it to the evidence folder. That was the only reaction it got. After lunch, we took the bus to legal aid. The office looked old and worn, but Artemis, our assigned attorney, looked sharp enough to cut through steel. She had dark hair pulled back, a tablet full of notes, and a way of looking at you like she was scanning for inconsistencies. I explained the situation plainly. Damien filled in details she didn't know, especially the financial parts Rhea never expected him to remember. Artemis listened without interrupting, then nodded once. This isn't just theft. This is intentional deception, false reporting, financial exploitation, and psychological manipulation. You did the right thing coming now instead of later. She took our documents and asked for every screenshot and recording, including the porch confrontation. Damien handed everything over without hesitation. Adult Protective Services need to get involved too, she said. He's a disabled veteran. This qualifies as long-term exploitation. Damien straightened. Good. Let them investigate. She filed the referral that same day. 2 days later, APS called back. They'd opened a formal investigation into Rhea and Trent. The caseworker said this wasn't the first time they'd seen something like this, but 12 years of lies made it notable. While waiting for their next steps, Artemis got a response from the funeral home. We sat at the motel table as I opened the email. They confirmed they never handled Damien's remains. No casket, no cremation, no burial, just a 2-hour memorial room rental paid by Rhea. So the military hero story was never official paperwork or a mix-up. She'd just decided he was dead and told everyone else to treat it like fact. Damien leaned back, jaw tight. So she held a performance, pretty much. The next set of records came from my old school district. Artemis had requested my counseling files, and she spread the pages across her office table when we met again. Every note made it clearer how far Rhea had gone. She'd exaggerated my grief issues, claimed I couldn't cope, and insisted I needed extra sessions. She had basically staged an emotional problem just to reinforce her fake widowed mother act. Meanwhile, Lila's files described her as bright, adored, thriving. No surprise there. That evening, while Damien and I sorted more documents, he suddenly went still. He walked to the window and pulled the curtain back. A Sliver Trent's truck was parked across the lot. No panic. No jumping to conclusions. I took out my phone and dialed 911. Hi, this is Kai Rollins. There's a man watching our motel room. His name is Trent Halden. We had a confrontation earlier today and he showed up again. I'd like to file a report and have officers sent to check it out. The dispatcher asked a few questions. I answered each calmly. By the time the police arrived, Trent was already driving off. The officers wrote it down as potential harassment and told us to call again if it happened. Damien didn't say much afterward. He just sat at the table and started sorting through the papers again, slower this time. We spent the rest of the night building the evidence folder. Dates, screenshots, recordings, receipts, statements, notes. Every lie had a paper trail, and we were finding all of it. By the time we finished, the folder was an actual stack, not just a bunch of scattered files. Damien tapped the cover once and said, "This is enough to start hurting them." I nodded. "And we're not even done yet." He gave a small, approving smile, the kind that said we were on the right track, and he intended to see this through to the end. Within a week, every agency involved started sending updates. It felt like watching different parts of the same machine click into place, one quiet step at a time. The bank investigator, Agatha, emailed first. She'd gone through Damien's benefit records going back 12 years. The report showed dozens of small, routine withdrawals that added up to thousands over time. None were authorized by Damien. Then, right around my birthday, a massive transfer drained what remained in the linked account. Agatha called to confirm the timeline. "So these larger transactions, you definitely didn't approve anything?" Damien didn't even hesitate. "I was hospitalized. I couldn't approve anything." She said that matched everything she was seeing. The pattern looked like long-term siphoning, topped with a final cash-out. She forwarded the report to Artemis and APS. That alone would have been enough to get most people worried, but it was only the start. A few days later, APS sent copies of documents Rhea had provided them. One of them was a so-called power of attorney. It looked professional at a quick glance, but anyone who expected Damien to sign something like that clearly hadn't met him. He took one look and snorted, "This isn't my handwriting. And this date? I was sedated half that month." He flipped to the second page. "This notary stamp expired before this was signed." Sloppy. He handed it back like it was a cheap forgery he didn't feel like wasting time on. APS wrote that down immediately. Next came the DNA test. APS requested it to shut down any "he's not really the father" distractions Rhea might try later. The results came in a sealed envelope. Damien opened it at the motel table, read half the page, and slid it to me. 99.99% paternity. Simple, neat, final. Damien didn't smile or get emotional. He just nodded once. That's done. A PS reviewed everything and sent a written summary of their preliminary findings. They listed specific observations: consistent favoritism toward Lila, chronic neglect toward Kai, emotional manipulation used to isolate him, financial exploitation of a disabled veteran, credible evidence of staged death, and false statements. The caseworker didn't sugarcoat anything. With the amount of documentation collected, APS moved the case into a higher priority bracket. Around the same time, court dates started rolling in. The first hearing was supposed to address the motel harassment report and grant temporary protection until the investigation finished. Trent didn't show. The judge waited 5 minutes, checked the docket, then looked at us. The respondent was notified. Artemis stood. "Yes, Your Honor. Served by mail and confirmed delivered." The judge made a face like he'd seen this 100 times. "We'll note the absence. Reschedule for a full hearing." Afterward, Artemis told us missing the first hearing hurt Trent more than he realized. Judges don't like people treating court like an optional activity. The second hearing happened a week later. The courtroom was small, almost cramped, but packed with people waiting on their cases. Damien wore the same flannel he had at the VA, standing tall and steady beside me. He didn't look nervous, just focused. Rhea showed up with a lawyer. Trent came too, standing behind them pretending he wasn't nervous. He wouldn't look at Damien. Not once. When our case was called, Artemis laid everything out calmly. No dramatics, just facts, records, and the video from the porch confrontation. Damien spoke next. His voice stayed even. My son and I confronted them peacefully after discovering 12 years of lies. They responded by stalking the motel he was staying at. They drained accounts I never authorized. I didn't know my own son was alive and safe for over a decade. I'm requesting protection so they don't interfere with us again. Then the judge asked if I wanted to add anything. I stepped up and kept it simple. I want distance. They escalated the moment they found out we talked to attorneys. I'm not interested in fights. I just want them out of our lives. Rhea whispered something to her lawyer, probably wanting him to object. Trent didn't move. The judge looked at the evidence, skimmed the APS summary, then said, "Restraining order granted 1 year. No contact except through legal representatives." Just like that. Rhea's shoulders dropped. Trent finally looked up, but only to glare. Their lawyer tried to approach Artemis afterward, talking fast about cooperation and needing more time for documents. She shut it down. "Stalling won't help your clients," she said plainly. Outside the courthouse, Damien stood with his hands in his pockets, watching Rhea and Trent argue beside their car. Then he turned to me, calm as ever. "This is only the beginning," he said. "But they're losing ground." He was right. Emails came in non-stop. APS asking for more verification, the bank pushing deeper into the benefit history, Artemis sending updated filings. Every system they thought would protect their lives was turning against them. And for the first time, the truth wasn't just something we knew. It was something everyone else could see too. Things finally started shifting in our direction once Damien's caseworker Ricardo called with updates. "You've been approved for HUD Veterans Affairs Supportive Housing Program," he said. "Housing voucher, case management, support services, the whole package." Damien nodded like he expected that outcome, not like someone getting lucky. "Good," he replied. "My son and I aren't living out of bags anymore." Within a few days, Augusto, the housing coordinator, emailed listings. Most were too far from bus lines or in rough areas, but one apartment caught both our attention. Small one-bedroom unit, second floor, quiet building, walking distance from a main bus route. Nothing fancy, but clean and stable. When we toured it, Augusto gestured around the small living room. "It meets the standards," he said. "If you want it, I can push the paperwork through fast." Damien didn't hesitate. "We'll take it." We moved in with just trash bags, 2 donated blankets, and a box of miscellaneous items Maribel helped us collect. The first night, we sat on the floor because we didn't have chairs yet. Damien stretched his legs out, scanned the room, and said, "It's fine. Better than half the places I lived in overseas." Later, he stood up and motioned for me to follow him to the kitchen. "You ever eat skillet hash the right way?" he asked. "I doubt it," I answered. He pulled out cheap ingredients we'd grabbed earlier: potatoes, onions, ground meat, and whatever seasoning packet was on sale. He showed me how he used to make it when he was young. Everything chopped small, cooked slow, and mixed until crispy. No speeches, no deep talk, just cooking like he'd done it 1,000 times. When we ate, it was simple and good. Familiar in a way I didn't realize I missed. The next day, Artemis emailed, saying Rhea and Trent's lawyer filed another delay request for restitution. The reason? It would negatively impact Lila's stability and emotional well-being. Classic. Artemis forwarded it with a short message. Their favoritism is now documented through their own attorney. Helpful for us. At the next hearing, the judge practically rolled her eyes at the excuse. After reviewing the bank investigation and APS notes, she ordered an asset freeze. No more transfers, no hidden accounts, nothing moved without court permission. Rhea looked horrified. Trent looked like he wanted to argue but knew better. The judge added, "Restitution begins immediately. You will start payments within 30 days. A week later, Artemis confirmed they had sold one of their cars. They hated it. You could tell by the tone of their lawyer's email. But the money had already hit the escrow account. One step forward. Things got worse for them when Trent violated the restraining order. It happened on a Tuesday evening. Damien and I were walking back from the bus stop with groceries when a familiar truck rolled slowly down the street. Trent leaned out the window, trying to look casual. Damien muttered, "He doesn't learn." Then he pulled out his phone. I didn't even need to do anything. He handled it with the same calm tone he used with doctors. "This is Damien Rollins. I have an active restraining order. The man in this truck is the respondent." Police arrived 15 minutes later. Trent was handcuffed on the sidewalk while neighbors watched. The officer asked if I wanted to give a statement. I kept it short and factual. Damien didn't smirk or celebrate, but I could tell he found the whole thing predictable. 2 days after Trent's arrest, I got a voicemail from an unknown number. I recognized the small voice immediately. Kai? It's Lila? Mom said, "You're taking everything and that's why she's upset. But I don't really get it. I just miss you sometimes." She ended it with a tiny sigh. I didn't reply. I saved the voicemail to the evidence folder. It didn't make me angry, just confirmed what we already knew. Rhea was using her to spin another story. Later that night, Damien sat on the couch we'd finally gotten delivered. "You all right?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. And it was true. I wasn't spiraling, wasn't confused, wasn't doubting myself. Everything happening was proof of exactly what they'd done. And now, for the first time, we were in a place they couldn't touch. A few months later, the apartment felt different again. Less like a place the system dropped us into. More like something we'd actually built. It still wasn't big. One bedroom, small kitchen, narrow living room, but it was ours. No one yelling down the hallway. No cars idling outside to intimidate us. No forced celebrations for a half birthday. Just quiet. One afternoon, Damien and I sat on the living room floor with folders spread out in front of us. Artemis had emailed a checklist, bills, VA deadlines, transportation options, appointment dates. Damien didn't dump responsibility on me. He handed me each paper one by one, checking I understood it before moving on. He didn't coddle, didn't hover. He treated me like a partner. We built a weekly schedule together. A week later, the VA officially named me Damien's representative payee. That meant I handled his benefit accounts, tracked every expense, and kept everything documented. I didn't mind. I opened a binder and labeled each divider: rent, utilities, medication, transportation, savings. I kept spreadsheets because it just made sense. Damien watched me type for a while, then said, "If I had known you grew into someone this steady, I would have fought harder when they tried to cut me off." "You didn't have any info," I replied. "You weren't given a chance." He accepted that without self-pity, which is something I respected. Damien wasn't a man who needed comforting. He wanted clarity and action. I enrolled in community college classes once the fee waiver cleared. 2 online courses, English Comp and Intro to Sociology. Nothing complicated. Artemis said keeping my workload reasonable would look responsible to the courts and agencies, and Damien liked the idea that I wasn't trying to run myself into the ground. The college advisor called to confirm everything. "You'll need about 8 hours a week per class," she said. "Manageable?" "Yeah," I answered. "I've got a schedule." Damien nodded from across the room, as if approving the answer. After that voicemail, we made a rule. No more direct communication with Rhea, Trent, or anyone connected to them. Artemis told us to block every number except attorneys. So we blocked everything. Email addresses, phone numbers, extended family. Even the landline Rhea somehow dug up and tried calling from. The only thing we didn't block was the official channel their lawyer had to use, but those messages went straight to Artemis anyway. If Rhea sent anything dramatic, messages about Lila's poor heart being shattered, or Kai stealing the family legacy, we didn't see it. Artemis just forwarded what was legally needed. APS kept sending updates every few days. They didn't talk in dramatic terms. They used plain, cold government language, financial exploitation supported by evidence. Long-term neglect and manipulation verified. Ongoing risk posed by the respondents. The police report grew thicker, too. Between Trent's first motel appearance and his restraining order violation, they had enough to consider him a consistent threat. His arrest weakened their position, exactly like Artemis predicted Damien didn't celebrate the updates. He read everything, asked practical questions, and then moved on. "Good," he would say. "That's one more thing handled." His treatment appointments started around the same time. He wasn't the fragile type who needed hand-holding walking into a clinic. He collaborated with the doctor, asked direct questions, and pushed for straightforward plans. No one in those rooms saw a weak man. They saw someone rebuilding his life without excuses. We got furniture slowly. A small couch from a donation center, 2 chairs, a metal shelf for the kitchen, a cheap rug that made the living room feel less empty. Damien insisted on assembling everything himself. Even when the screwdriver slipped or he had to sit down for a minute, he finished what he started. One evening, months after we'd moved in, Damien walked into the kitchen and asked, "What do you want for dinner?" "Whatever's simple," I answered. He pulled out the same ingredients from our first night there. Potatoes, onions, ground meat. "You remember this?" he asked. This was my go-to before I enlisted. This time, he handed me the pan and stayed beside me instead of taking over. He corrected my timing, complained about my knife skills, and tossed in little stories about cooking this in barracks. Kitchens for guys who didn't know how to feed themselves. When the food was done, we sat at the small table. No TV, no noise, just eating. It felt normal in a way I'd never experienced in that old house, and less like survival, more like a routine we'd actually chosen. After we finished, Damien scraped his plate clean and said, "They took enough from us." It wasn't angry. It wasn't sad, just factual. I grabbed the bowls and rinsed them in the sink. That's all over now. Damien stood and looked around the apartment. The shelves, the couch, the single bedroom, the closets half filled with our stuff. Nothing fancy, but everything earned honestly. He walked to the front door and placed his hand on the frame for a second, This place is ours, he said. Yeah, I replied. Then he closed the door. Quietly. No dramatic slam, no speech, just shutting out the past so we could get on with everything waiting on the other side. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel and help us bring you more and better stories. Thanks.